I'm sitting in the passenger seat of my client's car. I feel one of the back teeth moving around, and then, much to my dazed but numb horror, my tooth falls out. It's my left upper molar. I'm looking at it in disbelief, but at the same time, I strangely don't care, and I quickly shove it back into my pocket. I'm pretending to act normal as I'm rolling my tongue around the now almost empty hole in my mouth. I can feel more fragments of my now missing tooth still coming out. I can taste the drugs. I feel the enamel fragments of my now empty gum, and as I suck the remainder of the debris and blood, and still continue to suck on the lone gum until long into the early morning in my madness of using. I feel like a zombie. I now have been up for 3 days and I still can't sleep. Numb in an never-ending adventure of thoughts circling in my head. I always seem to be expecting something great just around the corner. With each corner I passed, nothing was ever great enough to quench my insatiable sexual desire or my greed to make more money prostituting. I grew up in a very small town in Northern California, raised by my loving Christian parents. I attended Sunday school, kids camps, youth groups. I was homeschooled throughout my high school years. My parents were extremely protective of me. After high school, I enlisted in the United States Navy, and for 5 years, I was a gunner's mate. I worked with guns. I was stationed in San Diego. I conducted 3 deployments throughout Europe, Asia, South America, and the Middle East. I fell in love with traveling and seeing and experiencing all the extraordinary sights. I loved it. In the period of 5 years, I also saw some of my fellow shipmates getting in trouble for drugs, alcohol. They were discharged, kicked out, a dishonorable discharge, completely miserable and with a defeated air about them. I told myself that I never wanted to become like that. I love my parents deeply. One of the reasons why I joined was to make them proud, and I knew they truly were. The very few times I was offered drugs, their faces would flash across my mind's eye, the disappointment, the shame they would feel, and that alone was enough to stop me cold and my willingness to even attempt drugs. I made it through and completed a successful stint in the Navy with an honorable discharge from the Navy. 2 years later, at the age of 29, for the first time I tried ecstasy. It was along with friends while visiting Barcelona. Prior up to that pivotal point in Barcelona, I was having an extremely hard time adjusting to civilian life. The steady paychecks that came my way every 2 weeks, along with the structured environment around me. It was like I was institutionalized. It took me no time at all to be out of money and completely lost. I was out of touch of what direction to take. One of my close friends at the time had started escorting, and after a few weeks, he had talked me into trying it. I became a full-time escort, a hooker, a prostitute. I found I was a natural at it. It afforded me the luxury of continuing to travel the world. Fast forward at that moment in Barcelona, at that moment, on it was a slow progression, but it crept up, rose up into me becoming a full-blown meth addict. By the age of 31, it was slowly destroying me. I'd had close friends confront me with my changed and destructive behavior, my constant and complete lying. I would say, I'm fine. I am. But I wasn't. When I was completely honest before, I was always so connected before. At that point, I was staying with my friend Brian. Brian had been friends and I for years. We had traveled the world together. Finally, a desperate moment of being desperate, shaking, nauseous mess from coming down of drugs. I asked him for help with his crazy life of addiction I'd created. He offered that I live with him for a month to try to get into rehab, but at that point, I wasn't serious enough yet about getting clean. After a few weeks of white-knuckling it, I had the ache to use again. I would do drugs with Brian when he wasn't home, and I finally flew off to a city across the country to make money with my lucrative prostituting business. I promised him, which was a lie, that I was still serious about getting into rehab. I figured I could make it on my own, which was a lie I told myself. Now in Boston, I fought for a month and a half to white knuckle it and to stay clean as I tried to stop smoking meth on my own. What took me out? An enticing call from one of the most generous clients to party for only one night for $17,000. One night's work. I was excited. I reasoned I can control my drug use. by only taking a few hits from the pipe, and then I would stop. Just one night with him, that was it. 2 days later, I was still with him. I'd never put down the pipe. The thought never crossed my mind that I needed to stop. At this point, I lost my apartment 3 years prior. For 3 years solid, I was on continual run with one hotel room to the next in the escorting game. Traveling around the country from one city to the next, always in a 4-star accommodations, somehow justified that I really didn't have a problem. In reality, however, I was a 5-star homeless meth addict. I traveled up and down the East Coast from one city to city by train only, so I wouldn't have to part for my drugs when flying. By the time I reached San Diego again, I was in the fullest swing of my addiction. I couldn't be bothered to meet up with my friends until weeks after I was in town. I finally made plans to go out to pizza with them to meet up for dinner. The moment they saw me, they witnessed how bad I looked and how off I was acting. I was so high at the time because in my mind, I looked great. I was acting normal, but in reality, I was 30 pounds skinnier than I had been 2 months before. My complexion looked more like an ashtray rather than my usual nice light brown color. I couldn't focus on anything my friends were saying. My thoughts, my responses were erratic and made no sense. Most importantly, I couldn't stop lying about the most stupid stuff. Like, I had been going to the gym every day, ridiculous things like that. After hanging out with my friends for just a few minutes, I remembered I had scheduled a client I had forgotten about, so I ditched my friends. So now my close friends realized how bad the situation had gotten and started talking amongst themselves. They confronted and lovingly hounded me. They had me pack a suitcase, the one suitcase I've been living out for the past several years. They helped me start to get into outpatient treatment even when I didn't fully believe. To be honest, in the beginning, they wanted my sobriety more than I wanted it. They helped me to get into sober living apartment, which all helped. I was able to get in Stepping Stone in San Diego, the only 6-month rehab program for LGBTQ in the country. After many hundreds of hours, groups, therapy, and counselor sessions, I realized and admitted I did have a problem. Admitting that I had a problem to me was brave. I mean, I was a gunner's mate for 5 years and fired explosive shells from a cannon. The bravest thing I really had done is give myself to others who wanted to help me stay clean. This is where I found my sponsor, who had also gotten to Stepping Stone and had been addicted to meth for years as well. Toward the end of my 6 months in rehab, the staff started to give me freedom to start working part-time and take my first college class in over 6 years. I'm now starting my second semester. It was here at this point where I realized I really wanted sobriety. When I saw my life slowly, bit by bit, like the missing puzzle pieces of my shattered life being put back together, I saw hope. Since graduating 6 months of rehab, I look forward to becoming the person that I was meant to be, showing the same kindness to others that was shown to me. I never thought any of this, good or bad, could ever happen to me. I never had an addictive personality until I did. Anyone can become an addict. It's times like this where I find that it's our friends and family that are the ones that have our backs and pull us through the dark periods. I'm learning to love myself and to value myself above drugs and bad decisions. And there's good money in that. Thank you.
Marshall Davis.